Fertilizers. Arnav, can you read out fertilizers?
Ma'am, only fertilizers or characteristics as well?
Both.
Okay, ma'am. Fertilizers are the sources of plant nutrients manufactured commercially from chemicals. They are inorganic or organic compounds containing necessary plant nutrients such as nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Characteristics. It must be soluble in water. It should be easily assimilated by plants. It should be fairly stable. It should not be injurious to plants. It should not disturb the pH of the soil, and it should also be cheap.
Okay, correct. So basically, fertilizers, as we said, it's manufactured in the factories. It's commercially manufactured, right? And they could contain, organic as well as inorganic fertilizers. So what if they are manufactured in the factory? Can't they pick up eggshells and break it up into powder-like substance and manufacture? Yes, they can. So that becomes an organic fertilizer. Organic, why? Because they have used a natural ingredient. Fertilizer, why? Because it's made in a factory. So it's an organic fertilizer. Right? Similarly, they could go to a slaughterhouse, pick up the bones of dead animals, powder it, and sell it as bone dust. So that again is an organic fertilizer. Right? So the characteristics are that, they have to be soluble in water, because if they are not soluble in water, they cannot be absorbed by the soil. The root cannot pick it up, right? It should be easily assimilated by plants. The plants should be easily able to absorb, break it up, utilize it, right? So it should be in a very easy and a simple form. It should be fairly stable, as it cannot afford to be very reactive, that it gets water and it starts reacting. Comes in contact with other minerals and it starts reacting. It has to be stable. And it should not be injurious to the plants, right? Just because it is producing more fruits and flowers, that doesn't mean that it has got certain toxic elements in it which is harmful for the plants and the consumer also, right? And the most important thing is that it should not disturb the pH of the soil. pH of soil plays a very important role. It should neither be, of course, it should never be acidic. It should be slightly little alkaline. It again, depends from crop to crop. The one that we have in our garden is basically somewhere a little towards acidic. Nowadays, because we are using so much of chemical, so it's rare that the soil will be alkaline. Everything is going towards an acidic trend, right? So fertilizers can be classified into nitrogenous fertilizers, phosphatic fertilizers, potash fertilizers, and NPK fertilizers. So what is the difference? Srishti, can you please read out?
Yes.
You are now unmuted.
The difference.
Yeah, just read out.
Okay, sure. Classification of fertilizers. Nitrogenous fertilizers, ammonium sulfate, NH4, NH4 2, SO4, calcium cyanamide, CaCN2, cyanide, cyanamide, CaCN2, urea, NH2CO, NH2, phosphatic fertilizers, calcium superphosphate, nitrophosphate, triple phosphate, phosphatic slag, potash fertilizers, potassium nitrate, potassium chloride, potassium sulfate, NPK fertilizers, fertilizers containing NPK in suitable amounts adjusted proportionally are known as NPK fertilizers. These are obtained by mixing nitrogenous, phosphatic, and potash fertilizers in suitable proportion.
Correct. So basically, as the name itself suggests, that nitrogenous fertilizers will have a lot of nitrogen compound to it. Like, For example, urea has got a lot of nitrogen in it. Calcium cyanamide has nitrogen in it. Ammonium sulfate has nitrogen in it. So basically all the nitrogenous fertilizers will have high and good quantity of nitrogen. Similarly, phosphatic fertilizers will have a compound of phosphate, triple phosphate, phosphatic slag, calcium superphosphate. So the crops which would require a high amount of phosphates would use phosphatic fertilizer. And what is potash? Potash is basically potassium. So all these kind of fertilizers will have a potassium component to that. And what is NPK? NPK is basically, in a suitable quantity, nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium. They are being added all in one, all into one gunny bag. Right? So that is what we call as an NPK fertilizer, and this is highly recommended and highly used fertilizer amongst all. This is the difference between manure and fertilizer, as we had studied before also. Manure is natural. It is obtained from decomposition of animal wastes, animal and plant waste. Fertilizer is human made, chemically made, inorganic salts made in a factory. Manure adds great amount of organic matter in the form of humus, so it really enriches the soil. It's slow and steady, but it goes for a long time. Whereas fertilizer does not add humus. That's one bad thing, right? Manure contains small amounts of essential plant nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, because remember, they're all coming from the plants and animals only. Whereas fertilizers will have it in, they are rich in plant nutrients such as nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium. Correct? Manure is cheap and is prepared in rural homes or fields. This is like, especially made there only in the suburbs. Whereas fertilizers are costly as it is prepared in factories. So proper sourcing of chemicals, blending them, preparing in a factory, packing, sending them, logistics, all of these cost a lot of money. Okay. Now what are biofertilizers? Biofertilizers, as I said, fertilizer is anything that's been grown in the factory, right? So biofertilizers are fertilizers which are, they do not cause any pollution, or they are renewable, right? So they are known as biofertilizers, correct? They are used for pulses, legumes, oil seeds, rice. They are being used to add nutrients to those kind of crops. Now, what are the advantages of fertilizers? Okay, this is what we had already discussed in bits and pieces. They should be readily dissolvable in water, soluble in water. They should be available for the plants, right? And they are good only for short-term use, so they have a good source of nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium. What are the disadvantages? They get washed away by irrigation because they're so light in weight. They are all mostly in the form of powder. So heavy rain, flood, more irrigation, it just gets washed away. It can also help in the reduction of soil fertility, and they cannot replenish the organic matter as in the humus of the soil. They cannot replenish the humus. They cannot restore. Correct? Okay, we go with the class exercises. Arnav, take up the first question.
Yes, ma'am. The crops that are grown in the rainy season are known as -I crops.
-I, that is number 1. What
Okay,
is
are
the
known
number
as
1?
dash crops. The example includes dash and paddy.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the answer. Yes, Bhumika is correct. Bhumika is right. Kharif and maize. Okay. Next, Srishti, take up this question.
Yes, the fodder crops are used to provide food to livestock. What of the following agronomical characteristics is desirable characteristics in fodder crops? Tallness and profuse branching.
Very good. Good, yes. Okay, now Arnav will take up this question.
Variety improvements of plants is carried out to obtain desirable characteristics in crop plants. Which of the following agronomic characters is desired in a cereal crop? Dwarfness.
Yes. Dwarfness, small leaves. Okay, Bhumika, you can type the answer for this.
Yes, ma'am. Intergenetic hybridization is the process of crossing between plants of this thing. I believe it is a same genera.
Same genera, yes. The species could be different. Okay. Arnav again?
Yes, ma'am. The graph shows the macronutrient content of a field. Which bar represents the result of mulching with macronutrient
You can
content?
skip, we'll skip this portion because we've not studied mulching, so we'll skip this portion. That's okay. You can take up this.
Which of the following agriculture practices has no harmful effect on soil? Use of manure. D.
Agriculture practice has no harmful effect. Okay, good.